Right. Hello, welcome to Observers Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. But before we do that, Buddy, I want you to tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
Well, it's pretty simple. On this podcast, we talk about games, but we also owe one of our very very faithful listeners, Alex Zhao, asked us to go through and rate all of the Marvel movies, and so we are progressively doing that, movie by movie. Actually, not quite movie by movie, phase-ish by phase-ish. So we're doing it in these 3 movie chunks, right? So the last chunk that we did last week was the beginning of Phase 2 with Iron Man 3, Thor 2, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, right? This week we are continuing on with the back half of Phase 2, which is Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. Yes. So, yeah.
All right, so how do you want to start this out? We'll start it out with Guardians, I guess, because that's the first one in the list. Oh, by the way, spoilers for all of these movies, if you care. Something that came up too is that there's it's funny to me. There's a spoiler for Titanic in Ant-Man, so you know. There's that.
That is true.
But what were your kind of in a word for Guardians of the Galaxy? What's your general impression?
So on my notes, I say I have Guardians of the Galaxy not in a great position. I have Guardians of the Galaxy at 2 stars, which is maybe a little bit meaner than I want to. I expected it to be 3 stars, right? I don't love Guardians of the Galaxy, but I also did not remember hating it. I just kind of thought it was fine. But you know, that's where it is. The interesting thing to me about Guardians was it was worse than I remembered, which is weird because I expected it to be good, and I don't know where this comes from. I expected it to be good. I expected to like it and think it was a good, strong movie. But instead I found it to be kind of weak and boring outside of the fun and games part. I've talked about this before, and this is quickly becoming a trend for these movies for me, where the beginning, kind of from the middle of the first act up through sort of the second act, that stuff is fun. That's you know, that's the cool stuff. That's the stuff that I remember. That's the stuff that when I think back on the movie and I'm like, oh, that part was great. All of those parts come from the middle of the movie. They never come at the end of the movie. And then the end of the movie shows up and I'm like, man, it's kind of a fucking slog. This sucks. So that was kind of where I was with Guardians. I also found myself I was more annoyed, I guess, by sort of the jokey jokes, the bathos humor with this one. I really hated Star-Lord. I don't know where this came from, but I found specifically Star-Lord very insufferable. A lot of the other characters were funny or whatever. I love Drax. I think Drax is great, and the bit with him is great. The bit with Rocket is also great. And there's some other stuff in here that's just funny, but I just I don't know, man. I really felt I was very burnt on Star-Lord immediately, I think. Which maybe is I don't know, maybe it's just a result of I have no idea what that is, but it's true. And the other thing is that I liked Ronan better than I expected to, even though I feel like the movie does Ronan pretty dirty. This is another movie where the villain seems pretty ineffectual. It reminds me a lot of Captain America, the First Avenger, where I kind of talk about how the bad guy really isn't super threatening. Ronan is not that super threatening. He gets made fun of a lot, which I just kills his menace. But I kind of forgot how much Lee Pace, who is an actor I like a lot and plays Ronan, goes hard on that part, which I can respect, even if he is the butt of a lot of jokes and ultimately not super menacing.
So I'm going to come down pretty opposite you. I adored Guardians of the Galaxy in theaters. I adored it this time as well. I think this is going to come down to that in the movies that are primarily about being funny, I'm willing to give them more leeway to be funny at the expense of the drama. I think this is like a typical difference between you and me, and I think that's gonna be fine. I think they'll probably come back in Ant-Man because I feel similarly about that as well.
Oh, I'm interested in that. I have problems with Ant-Man's, but they're very different compared
Okay.
to these problems.
Yeah. And but I definitely kind of get where you've in the past have said that like Marvel humor isn't always great, and there's also the moments where it like undercuts the tension or whatever. Um,
Mm.
and we'll talk about this a little later because it it has started to annoy me more in the quote unquote more serious movies. But in Guardians and in Ant-Man and in those kinds of movies, it doesn't bother me as much because I think it's part of the style there. Right?
Yeah, like there are definitely spaces in here where I think it works. I like the banter. I think that's where the movie is like strongest, and that's why like the middle sections are so fun. There's a lot of banter going around, and there's just like good bits in there, right? Like the thing with I think the prison break is the highlight of Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Like
Yeah,
from
I
the
can buy that.
moment where they're in the thing and the shot in the cafeteria, and he's explaining the plan, and Groot is going and pulling the battery, and that starts the whole thing. But it actually, like, the joke, this is what I love. The joke also sets up the action set piece because, like, part of the setup for the joke that will be paid off is Rocket is running through the convoluted plan, but then the convoluted plan they execute on, right? And is
Right.
used as the framework that you can kind of like expect and understand going forward into the subsequent action scene, which I think is pretty sweet. Um, I also think that it also works in nowhere, like where the group is fraying and they're yelling at each other, like they have this like bickery relationship. I love all that stuff, and I think all that stuff definitely works out fine. Oh, also, another part of Guardians that I didn't mention, the beginning really sucks. I completely blanked this out. I kind of vaguely remembered, like, if you told me they had started in the jail, I probably would have believed you because that's where I think of the movie as starting. But this whole shit from he gets the sphere to he brings the sphere to this planet, and then they have that dumb fight scene in like the middle of the plaza. All of that, I just think is detritus. I hate it.
Okay. So
And I kind of just wish that it started in the prison, like.
so I will give you that I am not the biggest fan of the plaza fight scene, but I will say that I thought that the opening where he's retrieving the orb is fun in like just in kind of like the stylistic music, right? Because like this
No, I like that part. I want to be clear. I am not talking about that. Like, as far as I'm concerned, the prologue, right, and then that first scene where he gets the orb, and then it ends with him flying away in his ship. I think all that stuff is great. It is specifically the fight scene on Xandar, where
okay.
like, and then all the other stuff where it's like, oh, I'm gonna send Gamora, and I'm Rocket Raccoon, and I'm also doing this thing. And I understand that you kind of have to like get the team together, but I'm just like, don't like the way this team gets together. Like, boy, I was watching that and I was like, I completely forgot how bad this all is. Part of it is honestly just cinematography, to be honest. Like, I've criticized the Marvel movies. This has the same sort of color palette. In that moment that like when I complain about the airport fight in Civil War just being very gray and brown, it's the same sort of thing. And it's only really in this scene. In the other scenes in the prison, whenever they're doing interior stuff, whenever they're doing like CG stuff, that all seems to be like great and fine and colorful. But it's this scene and also the end have this very drab color palette that I'm just like, this is visually terrible and also very sloggy. But yeah. Anyway, the middle part is great. That was my point.
Okay, no, that is that's fair, I guess. I think I still disagree with you uh, on kind of the uh, so the beginning. Like, I think if I wanted to make a good case for it, I would say that the drabness of Xandar and kind of like the beginning and the middle is kind of almost intentional, right? Because like it's the movie getting serious towards the end, um, and also it's like pitting our colorful cast of characters against kind of like the very rigid and ordered Nova, or Xandar is like the Nova Prime,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah, the Nova Corps.
yeah. I think part of that's intentional. I also do want to say that I think it comes through less in Guardians 1, but I think that the Guardians movies have like feel like they've got like a little bit more auteurness to them. Like I think James Gunn does a good job with it. Than
Yeah,
like the
I agree.
Marvel movies do. Um So there's that. But tell me, let's go into what your problems were with the.
So I think my thing with Star Lord, I don't actually think is this movie's fault. I think it's just a bit of a Seinfeld effect thing. That's actually an incorrect way to phrase it. It is. I have seen this Chris Pratt character in a bunch of places now because he's all like I've seen the Jurassic World movies, and he plays like a very similar character like there or whatever. That I think I'm just like tired of that
Okay.
archetype versus something like like The Rock kind of. Patrick Willems, like the YouTube guy I quote all the time, he once said that The Rock is sort of his own movie franchise, where like he more or less is playing the same character in every movie, and so you kind of walk into the movie with an expectation of like, I'm The Rock, and I'm gonna wink at the audience, and I'm gonna show you a good time, and we're gonna punch some dudes, you know what I mean, like that kind of a thing. Chris Pratt is also doing the same thing, but I have worn very thin on that compared to The Rock, where it's just like you can sell me on any movie with The Rock in it because I just respond to his charisma in a different way, I guess. I want to see him bust out of more casts like in the Fast and Furious movies. And I think that started here, right? Like Star-Lord was the first instance of that. And if it had just been Star-Lord, I would have been okay, maybe. But now it is Star-Lord and it's Owen Grady and it's his character that he voices in like the Lego movie. And they all have this like upbeat, overactive, puppy, immature man-child thing going on that I just like, ugh,
Yeah,
get
because
me out of here.
it's funny because it's like it's Andy Dwyer, right? That's the right character name from Parks and Rec.
Mhm.
Like he's like on in that vein, but not quite there, right? Like because I find that very separable. But
Yeah.
I take your point. Um, I don't know. It hasn't worn thin on me yet. Maybe just because I don't watch as many of these things back to back. But I get that.
Yeah, it's just a taste thing, to be honest. This
Yeah,
is the kind of thing that grates on me that doesn't grate on other people.
yeah, yeah.
It just is what it is.
Something that I thought was actually kind of interesting is that like the kind of recurring theme of Star Lord can't help himself from doing something stupid, which is like kind of like the crescendos
Yeah.
in Avengers 3. In what is it?
Infinity War.
Yeah, Infinity War. Um, I thought was interesting because like it was interesting that they were like I hadn't caught that the first time I watched it, but like Endgame or not Endgame, Infinity War happens, and then I go back and see this. It's like oh they it's consistency. That's pretty neat. Um,
There's a lot of stuff in here that I appreciated more. So I will say that the movie got better because I like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 quite a lot. And there's a lot of stuff in there that is reflected in here that I didn't pick up or like really notice the first time. Like Rocket's whole thing, and I remember thinking about this because like it's like a powerful moment where he gets really defensive about being condescended to and he's like he thinks I'm just something or whatever, and he gets like really mad about being called rodent or vermin or whatever. Like that reflects very well forward into Guardians 2, where I feel like he gets a more complete kind of like character arc. But I can actually you can see the real seeds of it in this movie, which I think is really great, right? Like this is not the kind of thing where it's like, okay, it's the second movie, we have a little more space, let's flesh out Rocket, and he kind of he gets a character arc, so he is now a different character, right? In this one, it is actually very clear that this was like rooted in Rocket's DNA the entire time. The same thing with Drax, also, I sort of felt like, where in the second movie his arc is more about he doesn't really have much of an arc, but he's kind of a supporting like fatherly character in a way to Mantis, and there's a lot of that stuff in here that I never would have picked up on the first time, but like because it got sort of spotlight attention in the second movie, I was like keened in to see it here, right?
yeah,
All of which I think is very cool and very good.
yeah.
The only person who that didn't really work for me for was Gamora. I didn't like. We talked about this when we did our Guardians 2 review, but I wasn't a huge fan of like Gamora and Nebula's relationship stuff. I thought that was kind of like the drama in that movie that didn't work great, and it also doesn't work great here. It's kind of just fine.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan. I think of this version of Gamora. I think and this isn't to the actress's discredit or whatever. I think it's just that like this version tries to also like he's a little too like dumb Amazon archetype, right? Like, which is also the kind of the niche that Drax fills. And I like frankly, I like both of their comic versions better, where Gamora's kind of like a femme fatale, and
Oh, I love Drax. Drax in this movie is nothing like him in the comics, but I love Drax in the comics. He's like one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Honestly, if I'm going to say something, the thing I dislike the most about this movie is uh, the interpretation of Ronan, who I think is like I think
Who
it's
is
true.
yeah.
Like I think it's true to kind of like the concept of the Zealot, but like in the comics, he's got a lot more nuance and is a lot less just like he's a hero sometimes, right? He's kind of like lawful neutral.
Yeah, that's what I also love that about Ronan. He is like the pure lawful neutral, like archetypal sort of character. Sometimes that means he's like a good guy fighting with the hero. Sometimes that means he's a bad guy fighting the heroes, and that feels I don't know, that like feels good and feels cool, and it absolutely does not come across here at all. Like he gets thrown way under the bus. Also, I think the Kree get thrown under the bus. The Kree are not bad guys in it is much more space politics than like evil empire,
right?
When it comes to the Kree, the Skrulls are kind of really the evil empire, which is so weird in the Marvel movies, where the Skrulls in Captain Marvel become like put upon refugees who are being like eradicated by this fascist Kree. And it's like, and like the Kree are definitely like authoritarian and not great. They have this huge hierarchy and everything else or whatever, but they are not like explicitly bad in the same way that the Skrulls are explicitly bad. But by the movies, the Skrulls are, or I'm sorry, the Kree are just like number one big bad guys the whole time, no matter what. They're bad. Like, which I don't know. I like. It's one of those things where I give it a pass, like an interpretative pass, right? Like, so for instance, it's the same sort of thing with like BVS. Like, I don't really mind that Batman shoots a car and the car explodes and he kind of inadvertently kills some people. I think you could interpret Batman that way, and that's kind of a legal interpretation, if that makes sense. Even if it isn't like a core, like the core kind of like Batman that you might like expect sort of thing. It's the same sort of thing. This is not very core to the origins of the comics, but I think it's like a fair. I don't know.
Not only that, but like a lot of the cosmic Marvel stuff isn't known enough for people to care enough. Like honestly, right?
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, and there's a lot of cool stuff that also pops out of nowhere. Like I like what they do with the Ravagers here quite a bit. So it's good stuff. There's bad stuff.
Yeah, no, I think actually I like this. I like this Yandu better than the original Yandu.
The actual Yandu kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of like whatever, right? Like,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
it's
nobody cares. Nobody remembers him, right? Like, he doesn't really have a character. He's just kind of.
It's funny because like the original guard, he's part of the original Guardians of the Galaxy, which is like this old thing that's like it's a very weird thing done in the comics, but
it's funny too because like also the Guardians of the Galaxy is a very different sort of like makeup, but like now people like the touchstone for people is the movie. So like Star-Lord, the character, who is not all that much like Chris Pratt, is like carbon copied at this point in the comics. So I'm told. I actually haven't read any of the recent Guardian stuff. I just have heard through the grapevine, like people have talked about this, where like the movie was so titanic and had this like meteoric impact that they basically rewrote the character to match the movie persona.
So the big thing I remember is like immediately following the movie, Star-Lord, like his hair changes color, right? Because it's brown. Like,
and then he also his like mask thing also, because he has that, but it doesn't look the same. But now it looks exactly like it is, and he has the guns from the movie. I mean,
he's also a lot less optimistic. Branding. He's a lot more, or like he's a lot less happy. He's a lot kind of like more edgy in the comics. But like,
in the comics he's kind of like Han Solo. He's like very Lancery, know. Or I guess I think of him that way.
I think he's a little bit even more than that, right? Like a little. But yeah, Guardians is also weird because like you get like it kind of rotates pretty hard, right? Like I remember like towards the end of Annihilation where like Jack Flag, which is a hero I had never heard of before, like it's rotated at some point. It's like in a wheelchair on some planet. It's weird.
Listen. There's Jack Flag, and then there's also Union Jack, who is also a flag character. He is an English super spy who wears a full onesie of the Union Jack. That is a Marvel Comics hero.
Yeah, no. If you get deep into the Marvel lore, it gets weird. There was actually a point in here too, or what was I gonna say? There's uh thing in here. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Fair enough. So the other thing I want to talk about was Thanos, which I thought didn't age super well, which is kind of unfair in a certain sense because Thanos, uh,
Isn't he
I
leaving?
think radically got. I have a feeling that the plan was to do third and fourth maybe Avengers movies with Joss Whedon, but Joss Whedon pulling out at the end of Ultron because he reportedly really hated Ultron and hated the way that Ultron turned out compared to the way he wanted it to. Like with like Marvel producers like really kind of tying his hands behind his back kind of thing. Um the and that him pulling out really changed sort of the back end game because I just feel like the Thanos that is here is very different to the Thanos that is in Infinity War. Though I will say they do a very good job of keeping Thanos in continuity in a way, which is to say that like the way Gamora talks about Thanos now lines up very well. I mean, like
Yeah,
she references a scene that then gets shown in Infinity War, right? Which I did not remember being set up that explicitly, but like now I'm like, oh, that's actually really cool. Like that's some like real
yeah,
context, right? Um, so like I said, I feel like my thing with Gamora in this movie is that she like turns too quickly. She just kind of tells you off screen that like, oh, I was secretly gonna betray Thanos to do a third party buyer or whatever. And I feel like that's like a pretty big character moment that is sort of brushed off in a piece of very offhanded dialogue that
yeah. Because it's like our introduction to it, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know if there's a
It's
good
just like
movie.
weird because you kind of you are introduced to the character and you have a certain footing and then she immediately undercuts that and I just like I felt that
Yeah, no,
that whole
I feel like the way
situation
to do
very
that is
weird.
to like like put her footing on that immediately. Like, like
Yeah.
you see like I don't know how you do this, but she like the scene opens up and she's looking at the screen. It's like betray Thanos now, right? And then like she turns it on and
No.
turns around.
Yeah,
uh,
like no, but like the opening could have been something like she's talking to the Collector about betraying
oh
Thanos and then
yeah,
shows
that's
up
fair.
or something like that. I don't know. I just like that
Yeah.
stuff. That stuff wasn't great.
So I remember the thing I wanted to bring up before we move on real quick.
Sure.
So something that struck me is that like this is the kind of like the group movie, but we already like the Avengers is already a thing, right? Like, and I thought it was interesting them trying to kind of assemble this team and have it work that way, even though it doesn't quite like I feel like it kind of stands in the shadow of the Avengers as a team movie. I think it's just hard to get out from under that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what you mean. Like, what do you mean the group movie?
So like this is like a team up movie, right? Like it's
Sure.
ultimately kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy are a group
Yep.
property. Um, and I think that like part of these problems that we're talking about, right, is that like they're all individual characters, but they don't get like the characterization of their own movies, right? And they're
Hmm.
less well-rounded characters in the first place, right? So I don't know if you could do a
Hmm.
Drax movie. Um, but I feel like this movie struggles in some ways to kind of get that coherence to sing, maybe is the right way to put it, because and just in comparison to the Avengers movies that surround it, right? Like the first Avengers movie and Avengers Ultron. Um, uh, I don't know how you can do that super effectively, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are pieces of it that, like, there are sometimes interactions that I think work very well. For instance, I like Star Lord flirting with Gamora, like trying to seduce her with his like Walkman thing. Like, and I think there are a lot of moments in there that work pretty well in terms of kind of like creating like the ensemble. But it's one of those things where like the movie never sells me on their friendship, and this is something that I talked about in the Avengers movie a little bit, where the world is bigger than that movie, right?
right,
And there are all of these little details in that script that suggest more, right, to it. And this movie has like a little bit of that. Like, like there are times when Star Lord is like, oh, like you should have seen the Caltraxian girl, she's got needles or something or whatever. And they're these like little bits, like these like little bits and bobs, but they never quite sell me on their friendship the same way that like in Avengers Age of Ultron, I am very sold on this is a group of friends,
yeah,
and maybe it's because they're bickering all the time, like and you just kind of can't do one or the other at the same time. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely get that. It is an ensemble movie, but it is sort of like this. Uh, it feels like an alliance of convenience. It feels like us in a D&D game when we haven't like pre-written characters to have like
Yeah, yeah,
relationships with one another, where it's just like everyone is constantly infighting and trying to make decisions out of selfishness or whatever, and everyone else is kind of like going along with that to sort of humor them in a certain sense. Does
yeah,
that make sense?
yeah. No,
I mean, and that is literally the genesis, right? Like they are quite literally an alliance of convenience to break out of the prison. But
yeah,
yeah,
kind of their desire to kind of like follow up on things doesn't seem super sold to me. Like the only thing that like works for that for me is that Groot as kind of like a kind-hearted giant that's like this is the right thing to do, but
mm,
he's like the only character that fulfills that role, right? Like,
yeah.
um, yeah. But that was my kind of last thought on that. Unless you want to talk about anything else before we moved on to Ultron.
No, okay. So where did you put it? Or do you want to place it, or do you want to
Let's do it at the end.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Okay. Ultron. Ultron, famously one of my very favorite Marvel movies. It was my favorite Marvel movie for a very long time. I remember when it came out, I was like, that was like fine, but then I watched it basically immediately. Like I remember it came to video or something like that, and I watched it again, and I was like blown away in a way that I have a hard time putting into words how well this movie works for me. I rated it back in the day 5 stars. I would continue to rate it 5 stars. I just love this movie. Though I will say, this one is weird. I must have seen this movie maybe like 10 or 15 times because it's one of those things that I'll put it on in the background. It's just like, oh, I'm whatever doing some wow thing, and I'll just pop it on the other screen. So I've seen it a lot, and I know its problems, and I like have stuff that like I don't love or that doesn't quite sing in the way that I wanted to. But there's just like, man, there's so much about this movie that I absolutely adore, and it is like the quintessential like almost perfect Marvel movie in that way for me. So boy, yeah, I fucking love Ultron, dude.
Yeah. So I thought it was all right. Like I never, I don't. I mean, and this is not like this is like still like B plus territory for me, right? It just
Mm,
didn't seem particularly um fantastic to me. I think a large part of this is just that like I don't particularly like Ultron's character in that. And
interesting.
that's not even quite right, right? Like I think Ultron's
I,
character
I
is
yeah, I would agree
interesting.
with that though. I get that. Like I think Ultron's pretty weak
Eh,
overall.
eh,
Ultron reminds me a lot of Loki, where it's like he keeps like explaining his motivation, but it's like never quite clear what he's doing. Like at first it seems like he's doing the typical thing, and you see this in AI movies all the time, where like the AI is like, oh, humans are actually like I'm supposed to protect humans by killing all of them or something, and it's like some flaw in the code sort of thing. Like that's in robot movies everywhere. But then he like gets to this extinction evolution place and he's talking about it all the time, and it's just like, what the fuck is like going on? And I do like it in a certain sense. Like for instance, I really like the scene at the very end with the Vision and Ultron talking. And I like some of the stuff that kind of like comes out with Ultron and like Tony, and he gets like really mad about it, and he's like really shitty about it, like with Tony or whatever. But ultimately, yeah, I feel that Ultron is not great.
Yeah, and I think the like kind of like petulant child of Tony, I think is a really interesting thing, but I don't think they pull on it hard enough. I also
Mm-hmm.
don't think that frankly, I think his voice actor, I can't remember the actor's name, is
James
great.
Spader.
Yeah. So I think that's a great kind of like voice for a villain to put it bluntly, but like I don't think it matches his villain well, right? Like I think you want someone who can sell that petulantness a little bit better. Whereas I think James Spader is much more suited for a more kind of serious villain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. And maybe that contrast is supposed to highlight, but it doesn't work for me. Um, but yeah, yeah, I don't think it's like I said. I still think it's a pretty good movie. Though I will say that this was like the kind of the bathos stuff like hit me hard.
Oh,
Um,
really?
so it's one moment in particular. It's the like when Ultron first appears and they go into fight and Hulk, or rather it's Banner, like lands on Black Widow's breasts. And
Oh,
just
yeah. That's a weird thing because that also happens in Joss Whedon's Justice League movie, and I don't think I would have noticed it at first, but then it happened in Justice League where the Flash lands on Wonder Woman like that, and I was just like, did he just use the same joke twice? Like, I don't know, it's just a weird Joss Whedon joke. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and like to the point, right? Like I like that really like grated on me, right? Like it was just like,
Mhm.
oh, that's the thing that Buddy hates, where like the stakes are undercut by like the dumb humor. Um and like
Yeah, I guess I get that. I get that. I do think that it's well placed, and I also like it as a character thing. So, for instance, so this is maybe one of the clever things about the movie that I really am just like, oh, mwah, so good. Where in the beginning they do the whole thing with like Tony says shit and Cap says language, and they're having that conversation
is-
over comms as they're like, he like whips a motorcycle into a fucking tank and Hope busts a bunker. But the thing that I love about that is that it is setting up a context that is then the sort of basis of like the character arc in a way, where it's like the movie's premise is that like the Avengers are together and they've been together for the last 2 years. They have been avenging things. They are referencing villains they fought off screen and like all like their adventures or whatever. And they clearly have a dynamic, but the core problem in this movie is they are faced with a problem that kind of rips them apart at their seams a little and exposes that like, yes, these people are all friends, but they're not working together as well as they think they are, right? So it's kind of a
yeah.
story in like group hubris in a way. But so the basis for that is you kind of have to show the group working as this well-oiled machine, which is why you open up on that one shot of all of them doing the thing, which is like that shot is the payoff, right? Of the original Avengers is the big, and it's the panoramic with the theme. Well, you start with that song in this one. They are in that mode, but over the course of the movie, they kind of split up and fray, and they're making decisions and they're fighting with one another, and that's where they kind of like fall apart and end up kind of coming back together. Where it then ends with a similar one shot with the big Avengers theme, which I love that stuff. I think that stuff is like super great and super fun. And it even comes out like in the middle, like so. For instance, during the fight, they're pretty harmonious, but then Scarlet Witch zaps their brains and like kind of plays on everyone's insecurities in particular, right? Um, Cap is like having this hard time imagining himself outside of, he can't see himself re-entering the civilian life. Tony's obviously still suffering from his PTSD. Side note, I think this movie does Tony's PTSD better than Iron Man 3. I don't think I had ever watched them this close to one another. But now that I was like, wow, this is like 20 minutes less of Tony PTSD content, and it is so much better and more direct.
Not only that, but it immediately invalidates Iron Man 3 by having the Iron Legion show up like first thing, right? It's like
I know. It's like Justin was like, you know what? Eat a dick, Shane Black. And I also like, and so for instance, the villains, right? Like, there's that part with the villain where he's like, there's a bunch of jokes in this beginning section that are all bathos humor, right? Where the villain is like, we will never surrender. And then he talks to his guy. And he's like, okay, so I'm going to surrender. And I think but the thing that makes this all work for me is that it is all part of the setup. But then when the fraying happens, it is taken seriously. And there are not jokey jokes anymore, right? Like, and so it compartmentalizes the bathos in kind of the correct place, where it is, here is a group of people who are not really in that much danger. This isn't a very high stakes situation. They're good at this and they don't have to worry all that much, compared to in the middle and later periods of the movie when it is like, this is serious and this is a threat we've never faced before and we do have to kind of like, worry about it or whatever else. That's part of my whole thing with Ultron that I just think is so great. I also think that the action is unreasonably good in this movie. It was like a huge step up, even from Guardians, which I also think has good action. But Guardians has good action because it has good, interesting frameworks, right? Like that prison scene that I was talking about, where it's like they crafted an intricate skeleton, or like a dominoes thing, where you're watching the dominoes tick off. And I think all of that is like cool or whatever, but it's not actually the filmmaking that's good about it. Like, I don't know. To be honest, I don't think the action filmmaking in Guardians is all that good at all. Like I can't even really think of a good like shot of action. I just think it's well structured and the scenes work in a dramatic context. They flow, they have good pacing. That's kind of how it works, if that makes sense. But like I think the Hulk versus Iron Man in the Hulkbuster armor fight is maybe the best fight scene in all of Marvel, in like all of the Marvel movies. It is like the perfect superhero fight scene, it feels like. Plenty of stakes, plenty of drama, but it's also like so Peter David, who's like a famous comics writer, I have a book that he wrote. It's like how to write superhero stories or whatever. It's like over in my on my bookshelf. And one of the things he talks about is like he says there are three pieces that make a good superhero fight, and I don't remember what all of them are, but one of them is like novelty or like uniqueness, right? Nobody wants to just watch a hero punch the other hero into submission, right? They want to watch the heroes do cool shit with their powers, right? And do like things that you wouldn't necessarily expect that of them, right? And the Hulkbuster scene is like full of this, right? It's all of this. It's like Tony he has the satellite thing, and you're watching, and the Hulkbuster armor has all these like neat functionality things, like where he catches the fist and then he like puts it in the puts it in the thing. The Hulk is doing shit like that, right? Where like first he gets locked in this little cage, but then he breaks the ground under the cage and pulls himself out or whatever. Then he, like all of that stuff, I think is just like, so great and so cool. That it's just like is really sweet. It also is there in the rest of the fight scene. Like there's Iron Man versus Ultron. They're shooting each other's with like lasers and like the Klaus stuff like that. I also think that there's like that middle bit that I like quite a lot with the which is like the unpowered heroes. That one is like Hawkeye, Black Widow, Captain America, and the twins, right? It is so there's no Iron Man, Hulk, or Thor to do like the big smashy stuff, and it's like a big chase scene. I think all of that, like all that action is great. The action at the very end sort of sucks though, which is another one of my things where I'm like, yeah, this movie does have problems. I just don't think it works, to be honest. There's something about Ultron's faceless mooks that are, I don't know. It's funny because the faceless mooks are an interesting complication in other pieces of like their fighting. But in this moment, like, and in the very end in the Sokovia stuff, it just like really doesn't work for me. I also think it's like I don't like the centering it around citizens thing. This is probably, people have said that this is like a reaction to the backlash against Man of Steel, which I'm already on record with. I don't agree with, right? And that like focusing the climax of the movie about rescuing these civilians and the mechanics of rescuing these civilians was a way to like, really show the heroes doing the heroism and not just fighting people. You know what? I'll fucking say it. I don't want to watch a movie about the firefighting versions of the Avengers. I want to watch the Avengers beat people up, I guess. I'm sorry, like that's just the truth. Like I don't know, like that stuff really doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and so I think the general concept works. I think that like maybe you need less individual moments of it, right? Like I think you can like have like the plot be like, we need to get the helicarrier, we need to get these people off the island, and the helicarrier shows up, and like as a macro thing that works. But like,
I agree with that. I think what it was is the priority in the moment to moment filmmaking was the citizens, whereas I think it should have been flipped. Where like imagine if the priority of that fight scene is fighting Ultron, but every once in a while you're kind of cutting away to sort of this like B plot of like, okay, Nick Fury, Black Widow, Hawkeye are like supervising the evacuation while Tony and Thor and the Vision are like blasting Ultron's face or whatever. In the version of the movie that we have, it's the opposite, where it's like most of the time it's like, oh, well, we got to evacuate these civilians. We got to catch a civilian that falls off the thing or whatever. And then you cut to Ultron like once every 5 minutes where he like does something. It's like, man, that sucks and is like boring and unfun compared to, a fight scene where they actually like beat him up. Though at the very end it gets pretty good. I like there's the moment where they're all at the Keystone and it's like we got to protect this thing, and then there's the big shot, and then they that stuff is all fine. Like that stuff is all work. But that comes at the very end. It's like 25 minutes of like the logistics of evacuating civilians, and then 5 minutes of this, right? Which doesn't quite work for me.
Yeah. So the thing I like, the kind of it's kind of related to the end point stuff that bothered me much more this time around is I hadn't realized the first time I watched this how hard they sold the kind of like, this is um Hawkeye's last day on the job, right? Like, 6 minutes from retirement thing. And like, I had kind of like, I didn't realize, it's like his wife's pregnant. I forgot his wife was pregnant, right? Like, it's like, and there's the ever controversial farm, controversial with
we should talk about the farm, but keep going.
but like they just like they hammer it in so fucking hard, and then they do like this is like if you want to like talk about like the like the bad like subverting expectations things, like this feels like terrible, right? Like where
Yeah. So the funny thing about that is exactly how hard they push it. Like, for instance, the team constantly makes jokes about how Hawkeye is the emotional core of the team. And in the structure of the script, he is the emotional core of the team. He is the only one that doesn't get zapped by Black Widow's, or I'm sorry, not Black Widow's, Scarlet Witch's mind juice, right? So everyone gets hit by this and they're all kind of like suffering under it. But Hawkeye is the one that specifically stops her from doing that and is working with the team to kind of be the emotional support, which is why the farm is so important, right? He takes them into his home because he is like a true friend helping his friends in need, which I love. I love this whole thing, right? But I do agree he kind of should have died, specifically because I think I would have preferred a version where none of them died. But the thing where it looks like Hawkeye is gonna die, oh, Hawkeye, oh no, and then like Quicksilver comes in at the last second, it honestly feels like the GM's NPC jumping in front of like the lethal crit to make sure that a player character in a D&D game doesn't die. It is completely contrived and like comes out of nowhere. Though also Quicksilver kind of sucks and is uninteresting, so I guess
will
I
agree
don't
with
mind
that,
if he
but
dies.
like the part of the thing that like aggravates me about this is that like he's bad at being a speedster, right? Like a speedster getting shot by bullets is like the worst way to kill a speedster, right? Like, that's like the one thing, like it's like especially when he like grabs what's the claw the bullets out of the air and like puts them. It's like, how does he get like? I get the
I love that moment. Yeah, see, exactly. No, I completely agree with you. I love that moment. I think that moment is great. Like he pulls the gun out and then he like lines them up on the desk or whatever. That's so cool. How the fuck does that person get hit by a bunch of like machine gun fire? Like all you need to do is make it else. Make it a heroic sacrifice. There's a grenade about to go off, and it's not like he can. You know what I mean? Like he has to run and jump on it before it does because he has a split second or something like that. You know what I mean? Like some way to kill this guy that is not him getting shot by a gun.
yeah.
Like I wonder if Hawkeye was supposed to die. I do. I sometimes look at all of that and I say they changed this at the last minute. Like Jeremy Renner was supposed to, get out of here and go off into the sunset, and they pulled the plug on that at the last minute. This is part of I have an overall problem with like people not dying in Marvel movies that we'll probably talk about. It's much worse in Phase 3 comparatively. But this is absolutely up there with like you are killing the wrong people that we don't actually care about in these movies.
Yeah, and so I wonder how much of the like if Joss Whedon would tell stories, right? Like they do a little bit to set it up, right? Like it's like he gets tired, like Quicksilver gets tired at one point, and like Nick Fury says, "If you die, walk it off," which I thought like in retrospect, right? Like I thought that made sense, and like they show him getting shot once, but like it feels like you need to set up a lot more of that, or at least like like show it to the camera a little bit more, right? Like be like show him like being tired or something, right? Like they do it a little bit, but not enough that I think it justifies it.
Again, I also would have liked it if it was true. I mean, technically, it was Ultron who was shooting the machine gun that kills him or whatever, but he was like piloting the Quinjet or whatever. I would have liked it as a stakes-raising moment for Ultron, moving from sort of the rescuing civilians phase to the just fighting Ultron phase. Like, imagine a version of things where Cap tells Quicksilver, "You have to distract Ultron," and then you get 45 seconds of Quicksilver zipping around, fucking with Ultron by doing all this speedster shit, and then Ultron does the like enough moment, and he kills Quicksilver. He like catches Quicksilver, kills him, and he's like, "I'm done with this bullshit. We're finishing this." And then you can move into that piece with like the key bit. That perfect, I feel like, compared to him getting shot from a plane that Ultron is in, like off screen or whatever, and all this stuff with Hawkeye. I mean, like, I understand the fake out that's happening there. And I kind of think that it's like a little bit clever, but I think it's more clever on the page than it is in actuality. And yeah, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where I can imagine, like I could imagine being in like my college screenwriting class, and someone's sitting there talking me through the scene, and they say, "Oh well, you're pulling the rug out, right?" And it's subverting the trope, it's subverting expectations or whatever. And it's one of those things where the people go ape shit for that, right? Like people on the page are always like, "Oh, that's so cool, that's so clever," but actually in the moment, right? Like the reason those tropes exist is because they are emotionally kind of like affecting or whatever. And I don't think people respect that kind of like narrative wizardry as much as they do just like
But
sincere emotionality in your storytelling.
you mean you didn't appreciate it when he looked at the camera and said, "Bet you didn't see that coming"?
Yeah. Oh my god. Right. Like put a pin in it. I guess. Fuck, man.
Yeah.
Like.
But problems aside, I like I said, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and obviously you loved it. Do you have anything you want to highlight about that you particularly loved about it?
So the two things. So first of all, like I said, it's like the action, the fight scene. I love that like Hulk Iron Man fight scene, probably the best fight scene in all of Marvel or whatever, right? But the two things that really get me with Ultron are the party. So after the first big fight at the Hydra base, right? They have that party. It's like an extended sequence, right? That party is the quintessential thing that I was talking about in Avengers 1, where it's like hinting at more and like selling this greater world and like this team or whatever. Like that these guys get together and have a party, and everyone's in there, like everyone's in there like casuals, their civilian clothes or whatever. And they're just like chatting and having a good time, and and you're getting these like little bits. Obviously, like you're getting like Black Widow and the Hulk and like Bruce Banner having their kind of like bet thing back and forth or whatever. You have Tony and Thor bragging about their respective girlfriends. I like all of that stuff. I think it is gangbusters. It is so good, and it is nowhere else, I feel like, in any Marvel movie. I like am so hard pressed to think of moments that work quite on this level. And the thing that gets me is it's so true to the comics. Like one of the hallmarks of comic storytelling is you do have low issues that are like this. Like, so for instance, I went back and I was reading The Ultimates, which is a 2002 comic written by Mark Millar, not Frank Miller. Written by Mark Millar, which is sort of like a modern retelling of the Avengers. And it has like Black Nick Fury comes from this, right? Like in the comic itself, they are talking about who they would cast in the fictional universe. And Nick Fury says, "I would want Samuel L. Jackson to play me." 10 years later, Samuel L. Jackson is playing Nick Fury, right? But one of the issues in that book is just Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man hang out in Iron Man's penthouse apartment, getting dinner and talking and just like hanging out or whatever. And that's like all over, I feel like, in superhero comics, because there's like the big dramatic stuff, right? And then you have like a couple of sort of filler-ish issues in between that's just kind of like doing B plot, low level, right? Like these people are friends, sort of stuff. And I just think, man, is that super important. And it also kind of like flips and comes back later with the house, like that. The first part sells on the like the wider universe or whatever, and it's like everybody's having a good time. But the house, when they go to Hawkeye's farm, the logistics of this, which I know are in hot debate or whatever, when they go to Hawkeye's farm, that is like the mark of an actual friendship, right? Where it's like Hawkeye is there and he has all of his friends who are having a bad day, they're getting wrecked, they're dealing with trauma, all of this other stuff or whatever, and he sort of reaches out to them and helps them through like that situation, that problem. It's just like, this is like true, sincere friendship, and it's so good to see it like on screen. So like this is the thing that takes Avengers Age of Ultron to like a 5-star, like A+ top choice movie for me, and why it was like my favorite Marvel movie for the longest time. Like the other stuff is great. This is the core. This is the meat and potatoes of why I love that movie. So that's my Age of Ultron thing.
Hey, that's perfectly fair. And just to clarify for the viewers at home, I don't think the farm thing is actually hotly contested, except by A1 Alex Zhao, who we're doing the series for. We at least have
Yeah,
to
Zhao,
give
who
some...
we were doing this series for, when Ultron came out, we had like multiple days of just basic arguments because Zhao refused to entertain the possibility that Hawkeye would have a secret farm out in the middle of nowhere. So, that's that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but we should move on to Ant-Man because I'm not letting a shortchange my
Okay,
favorite
so
Marvel
this
movie.
was your favorite, right? For a
Yes,
long time. Okay.
yes. I love Ant-Man. I part of it is I just kind of adore Paul Rudd. I think he's a fantastic actor and everything does, and I think he like brings his Paul Ruddness fantastically to this movie. Kind of going back to it, it's got its flaws, right? The plot is basically kind of terrible. The villain is bad. Um,
Yeah.
and the plot line is who cares. But
Mm-hmm.
and even like the heist part of it isn't super great. It's okay. Like it's not like the kind of like thing that was presaged by Winter Soldier is Marvel does this type of movie, right? Like Marvel does a spy movie. I think this is right. Marvel does a heist movie. Like I said, not great. It was okay. There's a little bit too much of the other stuff in here in it, but I think the characters really saw it for me. Like beyond like the like a handful of the characters, right? Like beyond Paul Rudd, I think that Michael Douglas does a great job of
Mm-hmm.
being Hank Pym. I'm not a bit huge fan of Hope, but I also think that kind of like the supporting group, right? Michael Pena, David Dastmalchian, and it's Ti. I think is the third one. I think they do a great job of kind of doing it. I also
Just
like,
good friends. They're
yeah.
just fun. They're fun people to hang around with, it feels like.
I also like. I really appreciate that like they kind of like go out of their way to like humanize kind of everybody in Paxton is not a terrible dude, right? He's like a really nice dude that's just trying to do his job right. I think that's all
Mhm.
really well done. I really love the movie. What do you think?
I'm in a weird spot because I actually think that technically Ant-Man there's a lot of stuff that I want to like point to and be like, oh, like this is cool. This is cool. That's great. But I feel like ultimately it comes down to a couple of things. One, this feels like an Iron Man movie. And I forgot how much it felt like an Iron Man movie, where, it's a guy with a suit and he's a jokey joke guy. And so like that was a weird thing for me to sort of grapple with. Where it just felt a lot like Iron Man. I don't know. It was like it's like watching almost a knockoff bootleg version of Robert Downey Jr. in like an Iron Man movie that's not about Iron Man. And so that's like one piece of this. The other piece of this, and this is my consistent criticism, this is what I thought about Ant-Man at the time and holds true to this day, which is that I feel like the core drama in this movie is completely ignored for Paul Rudd and his daughter and stuff, which just feels like I'm watching a movie about a minor character and the major character is just off screen. You know what I mean? And they keep talking about what's happening. It's like a movie that is God, I don't have a great way of actually I do have a great way of explaining this. Have you ever heard of shit? I can't remember the name of the movie. Okay, so in the 90s, there was a whole string of like Universal monster movies that were like redone as sort of like prestige movies, right? So you had like Francis Ford Coppola did a Dracula movie. You had this like weird Frankenstein movie from Kenneth Branagh or whatever. There is also a movie in that is the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde told from the perspective of his maid, like his like handmaid person, right? Who was played by Julia Roberts at the time. And that movie sucks, right? But the reason that movie sucks is because all of the interesting stuff is like always just happening just off screen. You know what I mean? Like the core drama of the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story is the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stuff, and you're only ever seeing like, oh, she wakes up one morning and finds bloody sheets. What could have happened? But it's like, wouldn't you have just rather been there for the murder, like the grisly murder that happened the night before, sort of thing? That's exactly how I feel like about Ant-Man. The core drama in this movie is Michael Douglas, Evangeline Lilly, Hank Pym, Hope Pym, and Corey Stoll. I don't remember any of these fucking names. It's like that relationship with like the father-daughter stuff, the mentor stuff, or whatever, and it just feels like Scott Lang's stuff and his personal drama is just like so on the. It's like Pluto, and I want to be watching the sun, if that makes sense. So that's like that I think is like the core structural foundational problem to the plot of this film.
Okay, I get some of that. Like again, I think it's a valid criticism, right? Like I think your Iron Man comparison is kind of apt. I hadn't thought about that because this is like the fourth time we're doing like, and if the villains succeed, then the security apparatus will dominate
Yeah,
the
I mean,
world with fascism, right? Like
this is another evil businessman. Really got me.
not only is it
That
an
one I
evil
think is
businessman, but it's an evil businessman that's specifically selling overwhelming force to something that will use the security power to take over the world, right? Like or like
yeah.
oppress the world. Like it's not even like in
Mhm.
solid terms, right? At least in Winter Soldier, you have like and they'll shoot everybody, right? Or like in Iron Man, it's
Yep.
like we're selling it to terrorists, right? And I guess you have that with Hydra, but it's like, and then the military will be too effective, and then don't even like lay out like specific stakes, right? Other than like there's a guy from Hydra who isn't even like he's like it's like Hydra uttered once as a word, right? Like,
Yeah, it is such a it's like an afterthought.
yeah,
It feels like they added a quick scene where someone says, "Oh, have you seen the new Hydra? They're doing cool things," or whatever the line was in a reshoot or something like that.
yeah,
Which,
yeah. But it works for me because it is ultimately supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about Scott. You know, so the thing I think they could have done better was have his daughter not believe in him, right? Like for at least a
mm,
little while, right? Because she's consistently in his corner, right? Like the theme is supposed to be, like be the hero that your daughter thinks you are, right?
mm,
Um, and I guess it kind of makes sense that she doesn't lose that faith, but like because like like I think that works is kind of like and maybe part of it is just that like he doesn't seem to arc that much, right? Like he never seems like he's not that hero. He's just kind of like you know a good guy, like because they even like cast his thiefiness as being like ultimately good, right? Like
yeah, I also agree with that. I don't think he has a real character arc. I do think that there's drama, right?
right,
Um, but technically, I feel like the character arc is more sort of on Michael Douglas and like Hope and like that. This is part of what I mean
yeah,
about
yeah,
like
yeah.
the core drama being the like the side story, which I find very weird. Um, like he is, I don't know. It just seems like he is a fundamentally good person,
Yeah.
and he never has to really change all that much. That said, I'm being a little mean on this movie. I don't think there's stuff that works. Like I like the. This is another movie where the fun and games is really great, right?
Yes.
Like I like the opening heist thing, like the whole thing where he like does the glue and for the fingerprint. That is cool. I love that stuff. That stuff is sweet. Even the training montage is, you know, pretty good, right? There's the thing where he like goes down the bathtub. I don't love this stuff, to be honest with you, because it's kind of a little more like, and it's like a roller coaster ride. Like it's just happening. It's not like Scott is really making any sorts of decisions. But it kind of, but like this is a thing that happens in kids movies all the time, which I sort of like forgive it, right? I think all that stuff is fine. But then when it gets to like the very end, or any like real action, it's not great. I do like the final fight scene in technical terms. Like I think that the constant switching between sizes is cool. I like the setup of him going into the quantum realm and getting himself out of the quantum realm. I think all that stuff is cool. But I don't know. There's just something about the that stuff is kind of like hangers on to some of these like deeper structural problems. So I will say the bit about Michael Pena explaining the story shot in the way it is like legitimately genius. Like
No, I will
A
agree.
plus.
Um, I think that like I don't know. So this is a very minor thing. This is like almost like nitpicky level, but like something that bothers me consistently about like this movie or these Ant-Man character is just that like the physics don't really make sense a lot, right?
Oh
Like
yes, that really bothered me this time around, actually.
yeah, like whether or not like how much he weighs and like how that affects the world around him, it just like doesn't like because he doesn't weigh that much when he's like standing as someone, but like he can apply that force behind a punch and like you know like sometimes things knock him over, right? And then like then you have the moment where like the train hits the wasp, but like it's a toy train, so it falls over instead, right? Like it just
No, I also this reminds me of Captain America's shield, which
yeah
like if you Captain America's shield by like the physical definition of the way it works in the first Captain America movie, it stops vibration, right? Right, like it is like a null object of momentum and energy, right? You shoot a bullet, the bullet doesn't bounce off, it hits and drops, right? The shield completely absorbs that energy, right? But then in Winter Soldier and in Age of Ultron, you have these moments where Cap is like people are shooting his shield and he's redirecting the gunfire with his shield or whatever, which is cool, right? But it legitimately doesn't make sense. Also, a lot of the times I was seeing it more in the Winter Soldier this time, and I've seen it a lot because I've seen Ultron a lot. There are some times when Cap throws his shield and the it doesn't make sense how it gets
oh
back
yeah
into
I forgot to bring this up last time, but like Winter Soldier is where Captain America gets his new superpower of like advanced trigonometry, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, like it reminds me. We played the Marvel Ultimate Alliance movies, right? All right, the
yes,
Ultimate Alliance games. The Ultimate Alliance games were famous for this because Cap had his shield, and he had a thing where his shield would bounce. And I'm pretty so. This is how I remember it. In the first game, you kind of had to catch the shield or something like that, which was like this thing where you would send the shield out and it would just be ricocheting forever until you could like figure out a way to get in its path and pick it back up, sort of thing. But in the second game, you throw the shield and it loops back to you automatically. But because it's like algorithmically determined, you'll get these things where Cap throws his shield and then in midair, the shield like does a right turn to get back into Cap's hand. It was like, I don't know, it's almost like Thor's hammer at that point.
yeah.
But there are like moments where if I just like clipped like a GIF or something of a shield toss in like Ultron or in Winter Soldier, and you just like slowed it down to like 75% speed, and you watch the shield as it goes like bounce, bounce, bounce into like his hand. There's a lot of that. And I feel like Ant-Man is full of this stuff. Like there's all this stuff where it wants to create drama around like getting shot with a bullet or whatever, or getting stepped on. But like if he has the same amount of mass, he's just like that much denser, right? That's actually not all that dangerous, right? Like it's not super dangerous
Yeah,
for a
stepping on him should be like stepping on a nail, right? Like like
yeah, exactly, right? Or like a bullet, for instance, should basically stop dead because like the mass of the bullet is so tiny and he has so much mass. It's like it's like shooting a neutron star, right? Like the bullet is not going to hurt the neutron
yeah,
star, right? And then there's moments where this really bothers me. So, for instance, he's falling through the drain pipe, right? And you see these things where it is clear that he weighs the amount of a normal person, but like the interior tiny little pipes, that's not built to hold up an entire man's weight. The whole thing should be collapsing, right? But like he can be carried, for instance, on this like floating bed of little ants. But it's like that floating bed of little ants can carry more than 200 pounds of weight. You know what I mean?
and
Like,
not only that,
and
but
just
200 pounds of weight
none of that ever makes any
distributed in
sense.
like a single point, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Like that, mind-boggling, right?
yeah,
So
it
I don't
basically
know.
works. And this is like an ancient Ant-Man problem, right? Like this is like how it works. Like this is the problem, like within the comics, right? Like people trying to explain how it works.
Mhm.
So not a thing that I care too much about because it like works the way they like you kind of expect it to a little bit
This is
intuitively.
very much nitpicky bullshit.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. But it does. I noticed it more this time. I think honestly because I made the note to myself about Cap's shield in Ultron because I haven't seen Ultron in a bit, and I remember I wrote down I wrote down Cap's shield has bad physics, like, and I think because I had just watched Ultron, I was sort of keyed to see
Yeah.
it here. I also just didn't love the so I remember the discs being more important than they were. I actually think the discs are a very cool thing, which is not in the comics or whatever, which I think is pretty sweet, to be honest, right? Like that's a neat aspect of Ant-Man. But all that stuff was like way less utilized. I think I'm remembering the Civil War fight scene, him using the discs more and doing stuff with the
I also
discs.
think it shows up more in two, which
Yeah,
I'm excited to see that again because I remember it being like a worse movie. I think we talked about it at the time, but I don't know.
I have no recollection of Ant-Man 2. I really don't remember how did that whole story go?
I mean, it involves a lot of the Wasp, so like the original
Yeah.
Wasp, right? Like that's like the big thing. But yeah. Do you have any closing thoughts on Ant Man? Before
What are
we
my closing thoughts on Ant-Man? Ant-Man, I do think is ultimately pretty bad because of this core structural stuff that I'm talking about. Like this is sort of the opposite of the way that I've talked about some of these other movies, right? Like, Iron Man is a good movie that just doesn't quite hit me in the right way. And so it's like I recognize that it's good, but it's just not my thing. I think Ant-Man is like actually bad on like a quality level. It doesn't hit me in the right way. In fact, I probably like it better than it is good in a certain sense because there is stuff in here like I said that does kind of work for me. But just like the that core drama, that core tension is just I don't know. It's like so weak, and the movie really falls apart in the middle of the second act, which I think is bad. Specifically, I think the heist to get into his house is cool. The heist on Pym Industries, I think, is really not great. It's kind of a little too frantic, and there's just like not cool stuff going on. It
also
feels like.
it goes a little too well, right? Like
Yeah.
you need a couple
Until the
cover.
very end, but at the
Yeah,
very end, it's already over. It's kind of like if I don't know, it's a good heist movie.
Ocean's 11.
I don't have a great way to. I don't have a great follow up for this. It does this thing where it transitions from a heist movie to an action movie. That's not
Yeah.
super well done.
No, and the only thing I think I disagree with you on that is I think it is like I think the character stuff makes it good enough to still be good. You just have to like not care about the plot, which I admit is a tall order to do, but
Yeah.
it's
No, I
still
get that. This reminds me a lot of in a way, Star Wars Episode 7. Something I talk about with Star Wars Episode 7 all the time is the plot robot thing, right? Where like the characters have this like relatable affectation or whatever, but like they're not real characters underneath. I wouldn't want to go that far, right? I do think that can you guys see Ryan right here? His little ears. I do think that the movie puts real work into Scott Lang, and I think he has like a real psyche. Like my problem with Episode 7 is that all of the plot decisions are decisions that are made by kind of happenstance, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like they are truly motivated by a character who is taking action. It feels like it's motivated by a script, right? By like the needs of the script moving to the next plot point. I don't think Ant-Man is that bad, but I do think that Ant-Man, like the core drama in Ant-Man is so weak that it's kind of a similar sort of problem where it's like, yeah, Paul Rudd is really relatable, he's really likable, and I connect with that character really well, but it doesn't really support it doesn't really support the rest of the movie. It can't really hold up the rest of the movie, if that makes sense. Hello, little boy. Hi.
yep. No, I buy that.
Okay, so where do you put these movies in your
Yeah.
notes?
So Ant Man and Guardians of the Galaxy go on top.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and Avengers: Age of Ultron goes between Iron Man 1 and Avengers from the fifth slot.
Oh, that's not so bad. That is weirdly not so bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so wow, that is weirdly not so bad. I expected worse from Ultron from you, but I guess yeah, I don't know. That makes sense. For me, so top is now Avengers Age of Ultron. Very, very best movie. So it is Ultron, the first Avengers, and then Winter Soldier, Iron Man 2. And then under that, I have Guardians. So it's Iron Man 2, Guardians, Thor 2, and then down into kind of like the bottom tier, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 3, Iron Man, Captain America. My placement there for Ant-Man is under Iron Man, like between Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 3. So it is Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 3, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Captain America. Ultimately, Ant-Man doesn't bother me in the way, like it's a 2-star movie, which is exactly what I had rated it before. It doesn't bother me in the way that like the first Avenger is a movie that like actively pisses me off. The Ant-Man is fine. Like I'm not mad about Ant-Man, but it doesn't quite work for me in the same way that I don't know, some of these other ones do.
So you want to give your full rundown then, top to bottom?
Yeah, so my full rundown, top to bottom, we've got Avengers: Age of Ultron, The Avengers, Captain America: Winter Soldier, Iron Man 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor 2, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 3, Iron Man, or I'm sorry, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 3, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Captain America: The First Avenger.
All right. Mine is Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Iron Man 1, Avengers: Age of Ultron, Avengers tied with Thor 2, Captain America: The First Avenger, Iron Man 2, Thor 1, Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man 3.
Yeah, wow, Iron Man 3 is really getting shit stopped.
It is bad. Yeah,
Fair enough.
right.
Okay, well, what do you want to talk about next? How's your week going?
Yeah, well, we both I know played the new Assassin's Creed, so you want to talk about that?
I played a lot of the new Assassin's Creed. I wonder if I can check my hours real quick. I have what the fuck? Ubisoft shows me my distance traveled and total kills, but not how much time I've put into the game. Time played. Fuck, 16 hours? Are you kidding? Wow, I put 16 hours into this game.
Yeah, I think I had about 9 before. I hit a progress halting bug, which is mild spoilers for Valhalla, but eventually you go to England, and one of the first scenes you're like you do a cutscene, and I can't get past like after the cutscene my character doesn't move anymore, but I like full cleared the first zone, before I moved on to the second zone.
Oh really? Wait, so you got like all the mysteries, all the wealth, all the whatever.
Yeah, in that initial zone, not in not in the second zone. I figured it's like, oh, recommended power 280. I'm nowhere near that, so I didn't. I did a little bit of that, like I did this stuff in the town, but like, did you do any of this, or how much of this stuff did you do?
I full cleared wealth, because so for the folks at home, wealth is like items, right? Like gear, and also like upgrade materials. So for instance, carbon ingots are an item that you can like loot, and that's considered wealth. But wealth is also one, special abilities, like special activated abilities, and two, gear. And gear is unique, but it's also like upgradable over time, which is one of the systems that I think is really clever about Assassin's Creed. If you like a sword, you can keep that sword for the full game. You can just upgrade it over time, and it kind of like stays at par with you in a way. Which I think is honestly a very great way to handle this kind of an RPG system, rather than sort of like replacing out as soon as I get a better, eye level sword or whatever. Being able to kind of have your full inventory like of gear open to you at any time, and you are choosing how to make that gear kind of like level appropriate feels pretty sweet. So I cleared all of the wealth because I didn't want to go to Norway, or I'm sorry, I didn't want to go to England, leaving wealth behind on Norway that I would have otherwise like wanted to use. But that was also because I thought that I wouldn't be able to travel back and forth between them, which is not true. You can go back to Norway once you hit England, which the story doesn't suggest that. The story kind of suggests that you're leaving Norway forever.
Yeah.
But then I got there and it's like, oh, do you want to travel back to Norway? You can fast travel. And I was like, oh, fuck. I guess I have all the gear now. So I did that. And then I did the first two zones in England. So so you arrive in England and you immediately get a choice. It's like, oh, you can continue the story in this zone. You can continue the story in that zone, sort of thing. And I full cleared the wealth on those two zones. And I now have opened up the third zone, which is like, so the first zone is recommended power 1, and then it's recommended power 20 for the next two, and now I'm at recommended power 55, which is about where I'm at, which is one of the things that I'm a little like, whoa, I kind of can't believe that the game is like keeping pace with me on this. But yeah,
I'm curious, what difficulties did you set things to?
I just normal, just regular difficulty, whatever it is.
Yeah, so I set my combat to hard, like out of 4, like 3 out of 4, when normal's 2. I set my exploration to Pathfinder, which is the most difficult because I thought that would be fun. And I set my stealth to normal.
Do you know what the different difficulties like are like?
So I don't. That's actually what I wanted to ask you about. When you like do a sync tower, do you see all of the points that you can visit?
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't, right? Like I see some of it, like they only pop up when I get close enough to them. So like the wealth and the mysteries, they only like I have to get close to them for me to see them. I don't get all of them by doing the Eagle Lookout Tower.
Wait, I'm sorry. So what do you see?
So like on the map, I will see some like when I get within a radius of them, I will see them pop up on the map, but not before that.
Okay, so do you see like the yellow dot?
Yes, but not like from.
Okay, and that is the same because
Okay.
because when I get there, it shows me the dots. So it'll show me here's a yellow dot for wealth, here's a white dot for
Oh, so I don't
whatever.
see the dots until I get close enough.
Oh, okay, so that's the difference.
Yeah.
And then I don't see what the dot is until I get close. Like when
Yeah.
I get close and I can do it with an Odin scan, whatever that's called,
Yeah. Yeah.
it'll show me this is a piece of gear, this is an ability,
Yeah.
this is whatever else.
Same thing for me.
Also, some of that stuff I found is weirdly locked. Um, and like this feels like a bug. I kind of can't believe the game shipped with this. If you go to a location in the story quest, like let's say there's a keep or whatever, and a story quest will take you to that keep to do this thing, it'll show you wealth at that story quest location that is not there. That I'm pretty sure spawns on enemies when the story triggers happen, which was really frustrating because I was running around. I didn't like my bow, and I was trying to find a new bow. I was like, I want a raven aligned predator bow, right? Because when you're doing raven aligned stuff, the raven aligns to the predator bow. So it's like I want a raven aligned predator bow, and I'm just going to clear out a lot of wealth, but and not progress the story at all to see if I can find it before doing all these story missions. And I kept running into this where I was like, oh, here's 3 yellow dots, and it's like a castle or something. And I'm like going into the castle, and I'm sitting on top of a dot, but there's like nothing here. And then I would later come and do the story mission, and then there's like an enemy to kill or a chest to loot or something kind of along those sorts of lines. Which eventually was like, fine, I guess I'll just do the story missions first,
Yeah.
which it's fine. I actually really like the story in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It's one of the first stories that's really gripped me that I've played in a game like this in a long time. Almost always, I fall off of games that have this very long, drawn out lead up. But Valhalla was just like it got me right in the action with Kierda. Who's that first warlord guy that you kill?
Like Gojva, I think.
Yeah, that guy. He I was expecting him to be like a bigger boss sort of
Yeah,
deal,
yeah. I was
but he's
expecting him to
actually
run
sort of,
away.
like yeah, he's sort of like the mini boss in the prologue that like first you get introduced to him pretty quickly and then you're like progressing stuff and you like run into his forces or whatever. And then it's like you and your bros are about to like fight him and I was like, "Oh, he's going to get away." No, you fucking kill him. Like, and that's cool. Like I thought that was great and it really got me into the like Sigurd and Eivor and the politics and everything like that. Just because like it didn't feel like like one of the things with these games that go super super long is like a movie is like in and out in like an hour and a half, right? So your act one is like 15 minutes, right? You have like 10 or 15 minutes to like connect to these characters, get moving. That's like not a lot of time. These games that have like 80-hour run times, their version of that is like 2.5 hours. And it's just like sometimes it's a real slog for me to play 2.5 hours of Act One bullshit. So Assassin's Creed Valhalla really, really kind of kicked it to the curb by starting the story off in a real place that had like a beginning, middle, and end. It felt like a pilot episode
Right.
rather
Yeah.
than a like the first couple of scenes of a movie stretched out over 2.5 hours.
I'd agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been definitely enjoying it. I'm curious, so I would recommend doing the mysteries to a certain extent, just because like they are fun, like they are like cool, story moments. They're kind of like they reminded me
Really?
kind of the side quests in Witcher 3. I haven't played Witcher 3 super extensively, but like,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like bite sized, but like one of them's uh, they're all like some of them are combat encounters, but they're all kind of like have interesting story beats, right? Like one of them is you find somebody who's like a seventh son of a seventh son, and he's like, my uncles and my brothers have all proved themselves to glory, and I'm kind of a coward, so I need to do something. And so he says, "Can you lure an animal over here for me?" And so you do. And I think you can like save him, but I just kind of let him fight it, and the bear like killed him, and he's like, "Oh, I guess he wasn't good enough." And it's like story complete.
I am role playing pretty hard as a Viking. I won't do any like story spoilers. But this is a game where I have gotten into the character in a way that like it's sort of like that Mass Effect Dragon
Yeah.
Age kind of way where like I'm making these decisions based on sort of like piloting someone else's character. Like there's a moment where you're fighting a guy like in one of these quests, right? Like one of the quests that I was doing at some point. You're fighting a guy, but he's like a really cool guy, right? And he's more or less just following orders. And you know that like the Lord he is fighting for has betrayed him, right? And has basically sold him out, and that he is fighting for literally like nothing. But like he is there and he's like, I am going to fight for my Lord, and I'm gonna fight for, like the glory of God, like against you pagans or whatever. And so you do this whole fight scene with him, but then you have the choice to kill him, right? Or to spare him. And there's another character there. And the character there wants you to spare him. He's like, oh, he doesn't know about the Lord's betrayal. If you tell him, he will surrender, right? If you tell him that it's hopeless, that he's fighting for nothing, he'll surrender. And then Eivor goes, no, like he is fight. He's not. I don't care about his Lord. He's fighting for glory. That was a great battle. He should die and go to Valhalla or whatever. And I was like, hell yeah, I'd kill this dude, right? Like, but that's like a decision that you like only makes sense in like Eivor, who like believes in Odin and in dying a glorious death. Like this is the part that I think is actually really sweet about the game, where like they make a big deal about like glorious combat and like honorable combat and like the cowardice of Eivor's dad and all this other sort of stuff. And those choices are pretty great. They're just like RP choices as far as I've seen. There have been a couple of times where I feel like there's a branching narrative, but the game doesn't actually tell me there's one,
Yeah.
which like feels good, to be honest. It feels like those choices have like real weight and sort of matter because they're not being systemized. They're just
yeah. Because you're making the choice because you want to make the choice,
story.
rather. Because
Yeah.
and there's a couple of these things too, right? Like during when you sneak in to like confront Rom, like his son,
Mhm.
Gorm or whatever his name is for the first time, like it's like your stealth tutorial. I screwed it up and I killed two people because like I alerted them. And then like when you go to leave to England, it's like two people died. Pay the you have to pay the blood price, right? Or you have to pay like the silver price, right? And it doesn't matter because
Wait, so you got exiled to England for
I
that?
didn't get exiled. Right? They came and they said you have to make it right, and Sigurd's father pays the bounty, so it's not like the end of the world. But
Whoa,
it's
that's crazy. Yeah, see, I didn't get seen.
yeah,
Like I got all the way in there without like alerting anybody or killing anybody. So that never even triggered for me.
yeah. So like when it happened, I'm like, what are they talking about? I didn't kill anybody. It's like, oh, was that from? Then I went and looked up. It's like, yeah, it's because you screwed up the fucking stealth mission, right? Like so. There are these little things that I think are very cool.
That is honestly super sweet.
Yeah. But like I said, I highly recommend doing the mysteries. One of them is like you fight a big moose. In the um but
Do they even have moose in Norway? I thought moose were
maybe it's
like
an
native
elk,
to the
but
Americas.
it's a big moose looking thing. Maybe it's an elk. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's whatever it is. But it
Or like a
is.
reindeer or something,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Also, like the mini games are weird but fun. Like the flighting, right? Which
I
is
like
just like
fighting a lot. I haven't done the other ones. Well, one of the things I told myself, like, I know Shadowlands is coming out in a week, right? So this game has a expiration date. And normally I would do the thing where I go and I do all the side quests and I complete all the missions in a zone before moving on because I like being that kind of completionist gamer. But right now I'm not doing that.
yeah.
I'll go get all the wealth because to be honest, I don't even think I'm going to get any wealth anymore. I still haven't found a Raven Predator bow, but I did find a Raven axe that's pretty sweet. Um, and so I've been like doing that and doing all my like cool like Raven gear stuff related to that. But I feel like if I get bogged down in the little side quests and mysteries and all that stuff, I'm like only gonna see like 10 minutes of this game. It feels like, you know what I mean. Whereas if I'm really focusing and kind of gunning on these main story quests, I can at least get like deeper into the experience.
Makes sense. Um,
Also, the way the assassins happen in this game is really sweet. I won't spoil that either, but it is an incredibly cool system that reminds me a lot of Shadow of Mordor. Though it's not quite that system. It's like you are you like are deciphering clues. You're getting clues in like lines of dialogue or like notes on the ground, and you're trying to find the identities of like these hidden guys that you're like supposed to kill. And it's very cool. It's super sweet. I think that that system is like really neat, and I'm all about it.
All right, very cool. Um, what else to talk about? Well, let's talk about Star Wars. I guess is there anything we
Oh
want
yeah,
to?
we played Star Wars. I actually really liked this session, to be honest, even though I didn't quite go the way that I was expecting it to in a way.
I
But I
was,
was like, I want to do a Starship session. We've like never really done
yeah,
like a real true blue Starship session. So the point of the session was like a space station explodes, and on the space station is a ship, and that ship just gets jettisoned out into space, right? And is just flying in space for 6 months, and then at some point somebody gets an indication that it's still around, so you guys have to like get it. And it was one of those things where I was like, okay, how can I make sort of like interesting challenges out of like spaceship stuff. Uh and I feel like that was like pretty cool. I like the whole bit at the very end. The spaceship combat, man, spaceship combat just fucking sucks everywhere. Maybe it should have been more dangerous. I thought that it was going to be much more dangerous than it was, but
yeah. I feel
whatever.
like it's kind of. I feel like, especially when you're doing it remotely, I like so that one time we played it at Gen Con, we played Starfinder like in person. I
Mhm.
thought that really worked out well. That's because we were like standing at the table and facing off against somebody else.
Yeah.
But like anytime we try to do it over the internet, it's just kind of like well, it's like sometimes like combat drags that like takes a while, but at least you do interesting things, and you are not capable of doing interesting things on your turn in like spaceship combat because you've got like less options of what I don't know how to solve
Yeah, and
that.
it always see if what it feels like, and what they want to do is they want to get that Star Trek thing where like you're all in the bridge and like each person has a station,
Yeah,
and it's like raise the shields or whatever. But I just don't think that that works super well in a round by round thing where like
yeah,
everybody gets their round of combat. Like I almost sort of think that it would be better served if it was each ship gets its own turn, but like you have an expanded, like maybe you get two actions, two maneuvers, right? And you have a captain who is sitting at a table and he's not actually doing things, but he's telling people, all right, one of our actions is going to the pilot, and then the pilot resolves his action. One of our actions is going to this thing, and then the weapons guy fires the gun or whatever, rather than this kind of like, because I feel like what constantly keeps happening is we get to people who are just like, what am I doing here, right? Like all the guns are manned, the computers or whatever.
yeah. I mean, part of that might be the party size, but even without that, I think that like it's still not great.
Yeah.
Like I think the things that make like combats interesting are like meaningful choices, and there's not usually a lot of them. And it's just hard to set up a space combat with those meaningful choices.
Yeah, it's also something that we haven't done a lot of it, obviously, so it's not
Harder to build to it to make it more interesting.
yeah. And I have no feel for the balance. I mean, I guess I just didn't quite understand how easy it was going to be to hit those guys. I was like, oh well, if I make them silhouette two, they're gonna have the bonus to hit, so they're gonna put a lot of damage on the ship, and they're gonna be harder to hit. So even though like you get the satisfying feeling of you shoot it once and it blows up, right? They kind of are like one hit kills in that sort of sense. But like there will be some misses in there, and I don't know, Nick's gunnery skills off the fucking charts, I
Like
guess.
that's the crazy thing, right? Like it's like neither of our gunnery skills are good. It's just that we have such high base agility that like
Yeah.
makes hitting it super easy. I think like you mentioned this last time, right? Like combat for combat's sake, I think is just not great system, right? Like you
Mhm.
need something else motivating the combat in order for
Yeah, maybe I should have added like a bigger, more powerful ship that you guys couldn't really blow up. But like, because the idea was that it was going to be hard to kill these things, but you could outrun them, and like your turn timer ticks down, and you astrogate away. But I just expected them to last and
yeah,
be more threatening, and then they were not.
yeah. Um but yeah, that's the thing to maybe figure out. I'm curious as to what you expected to happen that didn't go the way you planned. Was that it? Was that the ship didn't combat didn't work out as
I expected you guys actually. I was planning on another combat where you guys were going to have to try and duck. I was thinking there were going to be 2 ship combats. The first one was going to be at the listening post, and the second one was going to be at the thing. I expected you guys not to do this bribe. Like, I don't know. In my head, I was like, oh, they're going to arrive, and someone's going to be like, we're going to do a bribe or whatever. And then you guys were immediately going to say like no, and it was gonna kind of like devolve from there. But I think were relatively clever about that whole thing, and so I just kind of let it go.
Well, yeah. Also, like you didn't set the bribe price high enough for it to like matter
Yeah.
so much.
And then at that point it was just like, and then at that point Zhao was like, "Can I hack the money?" I was like, "Fine, whatever, man. It's $50. Who cares?" Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then also the end was a little bit different. I expected you guys to shoot the ship, and I didn't expect you to. I expected you to shoot the ship, and I didn't expect you to deal with the ship in quite the way that I was expecting you to take it more as a trial by fire, like the shutting down security systems, all that piece. I didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
That was always in my mind because I was like, I feel like it's important to give Zhao an opportunity for this stuff, but I just figured that you would be like sniping these turrets or whatever, like open the door, snipe the turrets kind of thing. So,
No, it was definitely a neat session, and like I don't know, it's interesting to see like Rohan and X are relatively new players, and they like very clearly come from like a more video game, like a crunchier world, right? It's like, and we can get more loot off of the ship, and it's like, how do you like? Because like it makes sense that those characters like would act, especially B, right? Like X has a little bit less of a defined personality, but I think that's just because he's less used to playing these types of games. But I think the right call there was for Jad to just like kick the thing out and be like, whatever, nerds, we're leaving. This isn't worth the effort type of deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite part of that whole session, I like the it's spinning and you guys have to figure out the spinning. And like I said, I expected you to shoot it with lasers. To try and get it to like unspin. And I had a whole little like mini game sort of built for that. Where like depending on the amount of damage that you do, you decrease or increase the spin. So like if you hit it too hard, you could actually re-spin it in the other direction, kind of thing. You're just trying to like slow it down, but as it takes damage, the systems are frying, which was kind of the thing with the core overloading. This is also part of where like it didn't quite go as I played, but I like the thing where you do with the tow cable and then you pull it out of its spin and it's going super fast. I just love that, like. As a concept, I think that is like a neat, I don't know, Star Warsy thing, right? Yeah. We're gonna jump out of the airlock to another starship that's going like a gazillion miles an hour, and if it overshoots us, we're fucked because we're going at max speed.
Yeah, no, I thought it went. I thought like that's part of it I appreciate about it was like B's desire to like be inventive about the solution. I thought it worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the other thing is that I wanted to create a mechanics encounter, like a computerish, mechanics-ish kind of encounter for because obviously we have a million fucking mechanics in this party. For like those guys to kind of sink their teeth into.
Yeah, no, it's
But I'm excited to like not GM this game for 6 fucking months as Shadowlands takes over my life. I guess that's not true, but whatever. I was like, I gotta tag in a little bit so I don't look, lazy. Right?
But yeah, otherwise I've just been playing some Apex Season 7. The other thing I wanted to mention is I listened to The Road on audiobook. Cormac McCarthy's
book?
Yeah. It is fucking depressing, but it's good. Like the prose is pretty great, but like it is a speculative fiction, like a hardcore, the world is in its decline and everything is kind of terrible.
Well, because he wrote that book, Cormac McCarthy's thing, as far as I understand. I read Blood Margin, one of those books in college, and we like talked about it. But one of the things that like the professor was talking about is like Cormac McCarthy seems like motivated by how unrealistic pop culture is about this stuff, and The Road feels like you think Fallout sounds cool or Mad Max sounds cool. No, it would fucking suck. It's like, and it's the same thing with whatever this one, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like Cowboys, right? It's like, oh, you think Cowboys are cool? No, shit was genocide, and it sucked. So it feels like Cormac McCarthy's like a wet blanket. You know what I mean? He does not have fun with this kind of shit.
But like I said, the pro, like I'm sure it came across in whatever book you read, but the prose is just kind of like incredible, like in like a way that like I think it also tempers just like how terrible the things are in the books that happen, right? Like if you run it through like 17 like 1,000 words, it like feels less bad, I guess.
Yeah. It's also just very evocative, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I would recommend it to people. But do you want to talk about anything else?
God, do I want to talk about anything else? I've started watching Kim's Convenience again.
Ooh.
Because you watched this. I mean, we watched it at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot how accurate this show feels. I mean, well, I can't talk about, I guess, a lot of this.
Say, do you have an Uncle Kim?
Yeah, right. Because I'm not a Korean immigrant in Canada. But specifically the mom, because my stepmother is Japanese. She's a Japanese immigrant, and the mom is so accurate. It's like painful. I like cringing at times because it's so realistic, and it's like, oh my god, I've been in this precise situation so many times, kind of thing. This is because the actor who plays Appa, the dad, was in like The Mandalorian, and so he was getting tweeted all over the place. And I was like, oh yeah, they did more seasons of Kim's Convenience. Why did I never finish it? So we're going back. We're giving it another shot, kind of thing.
Excellent. Is that it?
I guess that's it.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you'd like to contact us and tell us what you thought about any of the movies we talked about today, or any of the games we talked about today, or anything we talked about today, you can email us at podcast@subversiveplaygames@gmail.com. Or wait, no, I sent the two addresses at the same time. Podcast@subversiveplaygames.com or subversiveplaygames@gmail.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/subversiveplaygames, where hopefully you're watching this live. You can listen to the recordings on SoundCloud and watch the VODs on YouTube. Rate, review us, all that great stuff. That's everything I had. But do you have anything else you want to promote?
I have one thing I want to promote and one note. So we're going to be off next week because Thanksgiving. Megan's going to be out of town. And also Shadowlands drops 3 hours ago a week from now. So I will not be doing this. I will be playing video games. And also I will be streaming this weekend. I'll be streaming on Friday in the normal time slot of 11 p.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. But it will not be an episode of Buddy Gets Good. It will be an episode of Indie Investigations, which is Miguel's show. My partner in crime, social media manager Miguel at Akupara Games, because I'm going to be off the week of Thanksgiving for the aforementioned Shadowlands release. I am taking over his show, which normally goes this week, and he is going to be doing an episode of Miguel Gets Good next week. So I'm going to be playing Indie Investigations Wave Break. Shout out to my good buddy Kyle, who is the CM over on the Wave Break team. We love Wave Break, and we've been like friends with them for a long time. One of our marketing guys worked on Wave Break for a long time. So I feel like it's finally time to get into it on the Akupara game stream. Wave Break is a boat game that it's like a Tony Hawk game, where like you're doing ramps and shit, but there's also guns, and it's all very Miami Vice kind of like
flavored. That actually sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll check it out.
Have you ever heard about it? It's like Wave Break. It's a whole thing. It's also like a VR game. It's from a VR studio, and I think they have a VR version that I'm like, how the fuck do you do a VR version of this? But maybe
I'll check that out. I've got the Quest, so maybe I'll give that a look.
Anyway, that is it. That's the stuff I want to promote.
Right. Well. With that, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.